Okay, so I was very fortunate to speak here last year, and some things have changed in the last year for the positive. In 2000, let me just show you, this is just to show you a comparison of Earth to Mars. Surprisingly, because it doesn't have oceans, the surface area of Mars is equivalent to all the land masses on Earth, which is quite a bit. So just consider that when they start colonizing. There's a lot of land there, Mars terrain. Okay, so I wanted to give you a little background on those who don't know me. So that's my name up there. I have nothing to disclose. I'm not affiliated with any organization, except I belong to the Mars Society, as many of you maybe. I don't belong to any government organization, any private companies, et cetera. Just a personal burning interest. I was trained totally in medicine, nothing to do with engineering, so this is just a private thing. Actually, in 1980, I had gone to Houston, and I was actually interviewed to become an astronaut. So what happened is, at that time, the criteria were very strict, a lot more than they are now, and I had scoliosis, so that put me out of the running. At that time, people couldn't even have glasses. I mean, it was really, really strict. Now they've relaxed it, but it's still very, very tight. So my goal, like Dr. Zubrin's, is to see us get to Mars. As I like to say, I'd like to see people leave this planet before I leave this planet. So if you know what I mean. So much of our inspiration about Mars has come from science fiction, going way back to some negative and some good, like Robert Heinlein, but people also like the War of the Worlds kind of thing. So that is a mixed situation, but it inspired a lot of people to become scientists. People get into NASA. Like he was talking about the games earlier, you get to the minds of children, and if you actually talk to Dr. Zubrin, he, along with me and a lot of other people, got into the sciences because somebody inspired us when we were very young. One was a teacher, actually, when I was very young, who inspired me. She was a science teacher, and I was probably 10, 11. So if you get to the young minds, this is what we need to do. You know about the history, some of it, about the robotic missions, going way back to Mars in particular. As Dr. Zubrin was saying earlier today, that JPL and the scientific robotic missions are going very well. And one of the reasons is because they have a fixed budget, they have a goal, and they set their goal, and they have to form with that budget, and they get it done. Robotic missions to Mars go way back to the 70s, actually even before that, but the 70s when they had the Viking landers, and then they went to the robotic orbiters like Odyssey, and landers like the Mir rovers. One of them, we're not going to see if it works now, if after the storm goes away, with Opportunity and Curiosity. So there was many serious proposals to human missions to Mars before Dr. Zubrin even started, but he was one of the ones that were earlier one that were actually paid by the government. He used to work for NASA, was one of the scientists who was paid by NASA to come up with a plan by the original George Bush to come up with a Mars mission, not the younger George Bush, but the original, in the 1980s. And he came up with a good plan with a couple other scientific colleagues, and then somebody came from NASA and said, oh, we don't like that. We got to put a nuclear rocket and all the things he talks about you don't need. And it ended up going from like 50 billion to 450 billion. When the president saw that, he said, forget it, cancel that, we're not spending 450 billion. So that was a situation with that. So the first proposal was what I was talking about in 1989. That was called the Space Exploration Initiative. The estimated cost of 450 billion was never funded, obviously. So, and they wanted to use a lot of not yet proven technology, like nuclear engines. Dr. Robert Zubrin, who you know about, has the book out, Mars Direct. He proposed this way back in 1990. His estimated cost at that time was 55 billion. So over a 10-year period, by the way. This I wanted to just put in there to let you keep awake. So about curiosity killed the cat. So, so now that we have what happened in 2015, I sat in the audience and sat right in front in one of the sessions with Dr. Zubin and asked him, Dr. Zubin, listen, you've been fighting with the government and NASA for 25 years. Why don't we privately fund the mission? So he took out his wallet and said, money. So literally, I woke up in the middle of the night and thought about this, about privately funding to average citizens and putting out a mission, okay? So as you know, if you go to some place like Microsoft says, hey, listen, do you have $50 billion you want to lend us for a Mars mission? It's very unlikely they're going to give you the money. However, this is what I thought about. You think small to think big. For instance, if you took a penny, you probably heard about this, and you double every day, and what's that come out to, okay? So I took, in 2015, Dr. Zubrin's estimate of $40 billion over 10 years, and what I did is I added 50% of that estimate to $60 billion because I know how things go in the space industry, cost overruns, setbacks, et cetera, et cetera. So the goal would be to fund $60 billion total, which is $6 billion a year for 10 years. Now, in my 5th grade math, I figured if we can get 10 million people to come up with $600 a year, that's $6 billion. And that's not a lot of money for an individual. What that comes to is $50 a month, which is equivalent to buying a cup of coffee. And all of us have gone to wherever you like to go. Could be Dunkin' Donuts, could be Starbucks, wherever you like to go. And you spent more than $2.50 on a cup of coffee. I know you have. I know I have. And so if you took that money and put it aside, $50 a month, which is $600 a year, and if we got 10 million of us, we'd have $6 billion to fund private mission. Now, that might seem like a lot of people, but let me show you some of the other things. That this website alone that we monitored, there were 4.8 million people a year that are monitoring these websites about Mars, just monitoring the websites. So, and by the way, that's only people in the U.S. So if you multiply this out, right now there is 245 million adults in the United States, adults, not children. So that means if you 5% of the people in this country that put up $600 a year, we could fund a mission to Mars. Fund it starting this year, and in 10 years we'd be on Mars. And you could ask Dr. Zubin, if I said to him, Dr. Zubin, we have $6 billion to spend a year, he'd say, okay, we can do it. That's all there is to it. You just need the money. The technology is essentially there. What happens is, it's like when you're looking to build something and you find you have a problem, like he was talking about, you'll find a solution. You will find somebody who'll come up with an idea, and that's the way it is. So since last year, I've set up a 501c corporation, which is a tax-deductible situation, and so anybody who contributes onto Mars website will get a tax deduction. So this is 100% tax deductible. It's 501c3, it's going to the federal government, so that's all been approved. The website's done, the 501c is completed, and so if you wanted to be part of what's going to happen, it's going to happen whether or not we participate or not, but you can be part of history. And I have cards if you want to pick up a card, which tells you how to connect to the website, and when the spacecraft are built and launched, everybody's name will go onto those spacecraft to Mars, which they're doing that for NASA. Okay, so here's one thing I put in here. In the last 3 years, just from 2015, there have been a lot of new developments, new technology. For instance, in 2015, who would have thought they were going to launch rockets and land them back on Earth to the original landing, return to the launch site, and then onto barges, and then reuse them? I mean, they're recycling rockets now. I don't have to tell you who this is about, because I don't have to advertise it. I mean, everybody knows what I'm talking about. And how about the other company that's talking about putting in, within the next 6 months or a year, putting private citizens into space, okay? We've got Virgin Galactic, you've got Jeff Bezos, you've got Stratolaunch now, I believe. There's 3 of them right there. They're talking about within 6 months to a year. And I think Jeff Bezos is going to be the first one. That's my opinion. But things like that 3 years ago were not even, weren't even thought about. This is only 3 years this has happened. New technology, okay? Let's start with the fact that they are 3D printing now. 3D printing on the space station, and one company now who just 3D printed a whole engine, which they fired 100 times already. It works. Totally works. They're talking about 3D printing a whole rocket. I mean, you're talking about cutting back by tens and hundreds of degrees of the cost of a rocket just by 3D printing the engines alone, let alone the whole rocket, because now you don't have to worry about manufacturing. And the other thing about it is they're saying that it's not like you have to weld things together where you have seams where things can break or they can leak. The thing is a seamless technology. So you have it's almost like you just, one thing was just stamped out totally equal. So it's a better product. Now, they talk about new space versus old space. I don't like to say that. I think it's new thinking versus old thinking. That's the way I look at it. Because if you go to talk to engineers, just going back 4 or 5 years ago, it's impossible to land a rocket you've launched. It's impossible. These are engineers. I'm not talking about lay people. These are engineers that work at companies and work for NASA that said it's impossible to do that. If it does, it's going to crash. It's going to blow up. And then they're going to say, well, you can never cut the cost back of the rockets. You're not going to be able to cut that back by this X amount. You're not going to be able to relaunch that rocket a second time. So I think that's old thinking. New thinking is like the type of people that are saying, if we have a problem, let's find a solution. That's the kind of thinking that got us to the moon. And it's that kind of thinking that's got to get us to Mars. The only way we're going to get there is if we have the desire to go. It has nothing, we can find the money. I just proved to you can get the money from citizens. Everybody puts up $600, you send it in, and you get a tax deduction, and you can buy everything we need. And what they're talking about now is it might not even cost $6 billion. It might cost $4 billion again, because with these recyclable rockets, and with the fact that 3D printing, the next 3 to 5 years, the cost may go down by a factor of 10 again. So it's something that might have cost, for instance, now Dr. Zuber was talking about this, that launching an Atlas V, and we're not picking on companies, we're not picking on people, we're not picking on scientists, not talking about NASA versus somebody else. Just the facts are that launching an Atlas V that just launched the Insight recently, that type of thing, cost $350 million, okay? The one that SpaceX sent up to launch TESS cost about $70 million. So you figure that out. They could launch let's say three, for the same price as one. And now with the Falcon Heavy, they can launch more and heavier payloads than any place in the world. The only rocket that was bigger than that was the Saturn V. And if he actually builds the BFR, it's going to be bigger than the Saturn V in terms of thrust and payload capacity. So this is not easy, but thanks to new technology, it can be done. Thank you, NASA, Dr. Robert Zubin. And by the way, we have to thank NASA because none of us would be here if it wasn't for NASA. Dr. Robert Zubin would be here. Mars Society wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be here. So that's just a fact. Dr. Robert Zubin and Patricia Curran and Patrick Levy, who are on the board now, we created a board for the 501c3, so they were on the board, besides myself. And you for participating and coming here, and thank you. And any questions? Yes?
So where will the money be held in the meantime?
It's going to go into a bank account, and then basically we have to decide at the lower level, like with the first, I would say, a couple of $100,000 to $1 million, which we're already getting donations in. We would decide the first thing we have to do is do education, okay? And we got to get to children. We got to get to school children. We got to get to what they're talking about, STEAM and STEM. That's what we have to do with the money. We have to.
Through the Mars Society?
No, to onto Mars, okay? And then the next thing I'd like to do is, there was actually some things we could do to actually bring in more exposure, plus more money. NASA has a website where you can actually build a rover for $2,500. It's kind of a model after the Curiosity rover. Obviously, not the Curiosity rover. It costs probably $1 billion. But we'd like to build one of those and take it to schools and to show it to children and make that. The other thing is, what I was thinking about also is the other technology that's coming about is CubeSats. CubeSats, like satellites used to cost $20 to $100 million to build. Now they're coming down to about the size of that projector, okay? And they maybe $1 million. And they actually launched 2 test ones on the way to Mars. I don't know if you know about the InSight. And they're actually functioning. My thought was that as a preliminary to getting a manned mission to Mars would be to send several of these on one rocket from onto Mars to Mars, let them orbit. They could be used for communication. And maybe they were talking this morning about not having enough satellites for communication because the Odyssey and the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter are getting old, and they're going to be going by the wayside soon. So they're going to need communication around the planet. They're going to need relay communication with rovers on the ground. Also, they could use for GPS. So eventually, you're going to have to get GPS on Mars, just like we have here. You're going to have to be able to pinpoint things, and the only way to do that is GPS. They'll have to set up longitude and latitude. And I think if we sent 10 of those out, which is about $10 million, which is a pittance in terms of money for space sciences, you could probably encircle the whole globe of Mars, and you could use them for several, and plus they could take pictures and communicate with Earth, with each other, with any craft on the ground, and also do GPS locations. So there will be accounting after every quarter or whatever by law that you'll be able to look up where the money is, where it's going. So, and plus you get 100% tax deduction. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
What about crypto coins? Like that whole market? I mean, is there a way you guys could...
Be honest with you, I know nothing about it. And he was talking about Bitcoin before too.
Bitcoins.
Yeah, I don't know anything about it. I hear so many volatile things about that. I don't know anything about it in terms of like how secure that is. I don't know. I mean, I know that there are more secure ways that you can actually get 18% interest. I don't know if by law you can use that money in a 501c to do that. I mean, there are certain restrictions on what you can do with the money. Okay, so I know that. We can use it for education, we can use it for expenses, and we can use it to buy things that are going to further our goal, like we're talking about CubeSats. Okay, but other than that, there are strict IRS federal guidelines about what you can do with the money. So, any other questions?
You guys partnering at all with, like, or looking to partner at all with, like, SpaceX on their internet?
Well, here's the thing about partnering. My feeling is, if you went to SpaceX and says, hey, I got $100 million in the bank, he's going to sit up and take notice and say, hey, I wanted you to launch 10 or 20 of my CubeSats on one of your rockets. He's going to say, okay.
I mean, more from the standpoint of manufacturing those CubeSats. He's working very hard on getting...
I would say that's another thing we talked about, actually, with the few other people on the board. Because if we have money in the bank, if you might know that he's trying to put up those satellites, the Starlink and things, because he's trying to generate funds to do the Mars missions.
Right.
So if I said to him, hey, we've got funds coming in every month, I think that we could partner up with him and say, we're going to launch with you. It's as simple as that. It's like, right? I mean, if he's the first one and the one that has the best and the least expensive rocket to get us there, then that's what we're doing. I mean, I don't think Jeff Bezos, my feeling, it doesn't seem like he's interested in Mars. He's looking to, as a good businessman, he's looking to make money, obviously. And so he's looking at the moon and as a near-term thing where he could make some money launching those. There's several of those landers that people are putting out now, the private ones. I think he wants to get in on that. And then I don't know if he's going to get in on putting up the, help with that gateway around the moon.
It's all gonna depend on which direction the winds blow.
Yeah, right, exactly. So, but he'll be there with the rocket, I think, ready in the next 2 or 3 years.
Glenn should be up in the next, what, 2 years?
2 years, I think he said 2 years. He said 2 years. So, anything else I can help you with? So I'll have cards here if anybody wants to pick up a card. And then if anybody's interested in going to the website, you can go to the website and you can check out all that's happening.
On a donation like that, are you looking primarily for like a single shot donation or a monthly contribution?
Whatever you want to do. You know, whatever. You could donate $50, you can donate $5,000. Whatever you desire, and whatever it is, it's tax deductible. You get a receipt. Even your check is a receipt, but, yes, sir.
Your ideas about private funding are attractive to me, and they kind of dovetail in with, if I can put in a plug for my talk tomorrow in this room at 4:30, about developing an in-space economy, so you can make money.
Okay, well, that's good. So, well, thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much.